Okay, so headline number 5, according to the Wall Street Journal, instant delivery providers are losing an average of $20 per order. The news comes as at least 6 startups, including Gorillas, GoPuff, Joker, Getir, and Bike, are vying to win the chance to ferry groceries to customers within 10 to 20 minutes of their order placement on an app. Now, some of the companies are averaging a loss of over $20 per order when factoring in costs like advertising, sources told the Wall Street Journal. Now, Fridge No More, another New York-based company that launched in 2020, as of September, its average order value was $33, according to a 2021 investor presentation viewed by the Wall Street Journal. And after paying for those products, for packing, for delivery, et cetera, it lost $3.30 on every order, which doesn't include the marketing costs. That very same investor presentations from Fridge No More said that they spent $70 on advertising per customer in the 10 months through September of that year. Chris, these are some startling statistics. Everybody's freaking out about this everywhere that you're reading, saying, what's going on with these instant delivery providers? They're never going to survive. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I teased it before, and I think and I say that because I've seen this referenced a couple of times in posts following that, or other commentary, or there are other articles even written about this subject since the Wall Street Journal debuted this article. I don't love the reporting on this. I think it's very biased. It's biased in even how the headline is written. It doesn't look at the other angles and aspects to the business models at play here. And specifically, I want to talk about the reference point to Cosmo.com that's at the end. But stepping back from all of that, here's what I would say. And it reminds me of something that a buddy of mine, Larry Wicken, told me yesterday, which is Sturgeon's Law, which he had heard Mark Andreessen reference recently. And for those that aren't familiar with it, because I wasn't, and I had to look it up. And
I am not.
It's kind of cool.
Tell me what Sturgeon's Law is.
It's basically that 90% of everything out there is crap. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And when you think about all the startups and everything, that's true. Probably more than that. 90% of them aren't going to work. Okay. So this headline in and of itself should not be a surprise. In fact, it should be exactly how things are playing out, that many people are struggling to find profitability because they're not yet at scale. But it also, therefore, is not a reason to poo-poo the whole concept, because there's VC money to sustain it. As you talked about last week and I've talked about before, it's a very addictive experience. So if you can get people into it, it's going to make a ton of sense. Now, to the point about Cosmo, there's a lot of the Cosmo, for those that remember, was the instant delivery service in New York in 2000. And the article is basically, that didn't work then. Why should this work now? Things are so much different now.
Oh God, yeah.
Like
that's
you have mobile applications, you have advertising networks that can come into play. You have differences in automation. You have the gig economy that come into play in this too. Like, let's not throw everything out now because of things that happened 20 years ago. That makes no goddamn sense to me.
That was pre-iPhone. Like, that's insane. Right. You can't even that's just not even comparable.
Right. But I mean, that's my take on this is like, yes, of course that's what's happening. Because it's got $15 billion of VC funding to help people get to the scale. What else do you expect to see?
Yeah, I get so angered by seeing these posts. I know it sounds ridiculous, but even when we were picking stories for this week, I had to include this one because I think people just need to stop. Take a pause. This instant delivery is still in its infancy. It's still in its very early years. It needs time to find those efficiencies that you were talking about and to determine what the right model is. And you're right, not everybody's going to make it. There will be consolidation. Customer acquisition costs are high. That goes without saying. But the concept is sticky and it will only continue to be. I mean, Chris, our first bike order in New York, we got $20 off the order. And that was astonishing to me. We paid just delivery fee, just the delivery fee and tip. But how many more times did we use it? And how many times have we talked about it on this podcast? How many people have we told about it? I think that you're making judgments way too early. The last thing I'll say is this doesn't include things like subscription revenue. They didn't even mention it in that article. Right. What happens when you have, a DoorDash pass and that delivery becomes free, or testing whether people are willing to pay more in fees for convenience down the road. That's not even brought up into this discussion. It's just immediately dismissing it. So, share what your thoughts are, listeners. We'd love to hear from you. But I think it's way too early to be calling it quits on these guys.
I mean, you just
And
raised
who's Sturgeon?
Yeah, right.
That's my second question.
He was a science fiction author that came about that. He was basically, for those who want to know the origin of this, he was retorting against people that were complaining that science fiction is all baloney. And he's like, all you guys read about baloney. Science fiction is no different. And so, but the applicability to the VC world, I think, is really there. But Ann, you know, the other thing, I think you brought up a ton of great points there in terms of other aspects that should have brought into the article, if you're going to write an article like that.
Right.
And then number two, I thought of something last night as I was like going to bed for this podcast, which is what I do. You know, I think about podcast ideas all the time or things to talk about.
Cool.
But like, yeah, it's super nerdy, right? But the way you describe your experience to me with bike and GoPuff while we're in New York is, and I think this is really important, is we're getting to a place here where it's like, I'm going to GoPuff it or I'm going to bike it. And somebody's going to win that action. And when that is a part of the conversation, that is really powerful, right? You can think like, I'm going to take an Uber, I'm going to take a Lyft, where that becomes synonymous with, I'm actually getting a taxi.
Yes.
Right. And that's 100%. Going to happen here, right? Like we've never talked about that, but do you agree with that? I think that's
for sure.
That's what's bound to happen here.
And Uber just had their first profitable quarter after 13 years in existence last month. Like, give it a break, people.